Hello, this is Pat Connolly, and for the next hour I'll be reading from the New York Times, but what is the date? I'm sorry, let me go back. Hello, this is Pat Connolly, and for the next hour I'll be reading from the April 28th issue of the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. This first article about the recent assassination attempt. Grievance propelled gala attack suspect across country, authorities say. A man who has worked as a tutor and graduated from the California Institute of Technology was charged with trying to assassinate the president after an armed attack at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. By Amy Quinn, Chelsea Rose Marcius, and Sean Hubler. Before he embarked on a cross-country journey, Cole Thomas Allen offered the people in his life a series of explanations for his absence, according to writings that the authorities say he left behind. He had a personal emergency, he told his colleagues and the students he was tutoring. He told his parents simply that he had an interview. But Mr. Allen of Torrance, California, appears to have had a much different and much darker plan when he set out on a train to Washington, according to two senior law enforcement officials. He's now in custody, accused of charging through security outside the White House Correspondents' Dinner, setting off a flurry of gunfire. In a court appearance in Washington on Monday, Mr. Allen, 31, was charged with trying to assassinate President Trump. Now, friends and acquaintances of Mr. Allen are struggling to reconcile the man they know with the shocking act of political violence that he has been accused of perpetrating. The writing the authorities attributed to Mr. Allen bounced between remorse for the deception of friends and family and gratitude for a lifetime of love and support. In it, he displayed outrage at the policies put in place by the White House and alluded to allegations of sexual misconduct, saying that he is, quoting, no longer willing, end quote, to allow, quoting, a traitor to coat my hands with his crimes, end quote, an apparent reference to President Trump, though the writing does not mention him by name. The two law enforcement officials who shared the writings with the New York Times asked not to be named because they had not been authorized to disclose the information. Close relatives of Mr. Allen declined to discuss his arrest or did not respond to requests for comment. The writing said, the suspect had come to the Washington Hilton looking for members of the Trump administration. Quoting, administration officials, not including Mr. Patel, they are targets, prioritized from the highest ranking to lowest, end quote, the writing reads, apparently referring to Kash Patel, the FBI director. It was not clear from the writing why Mr. Patel was mentioned by name. The language seemed foreign to Mr. Allen's neighbors, former classmates, and tutoring clients in Torrance, a suburb of Los Angeles. There, the home he shared was swarmed shortly before midnight Saturday by a SWAT team from the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Mr. Allen was a registered no-party preference voter, the California equivalent of an independent. His sole political contribution in available records appears to have been $25 to the campaign for Kamala Harris, the Democratic presidential nominee in the fall of 2024. Quoting, he seemed like a completely average guy. Max Harris, a senior at a local high school who had been tutored for several months by Mr. Allen, said, late Saturday night, as he stood near the crowd of federal authorities and onlookers who had gathered outside the modest two-story house where Mr. Allen lived in Torrance. Quoting again, like I never would have expected anything like this from a guy like him, end quote. Mr. Allen was listed as a tutor with C2 Education, C2 letter C number 2, C2 Education, which issued a statement Sunday that said they were cooperating with law enforcement. Violence of any kind is never the answer, the organization said. The authorities have said that the suspect in the Saturday attack was taken into custody shortly after charging through a security checkpoint inside the Washington Hilton. He was armed with knives, a shotgun, and a handgun, authorities have said. The suspect is initially expected to be charged with 2 counts of using a firearm and 1 count of assault on a federal officer using a dangerous weapon, Janine Pirro, the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, said on Saturday. He is scheduled to be arraigned on Monday in federal district court, and additional charges are expected, she said. Mr. Allen was born the oldest of 4 siblings in Los Angeles County. As of Saturday night, Mr. Allen's father, who was listed online as an elder at Grace Torrance, which describes itself as a Protestant church in the Reformed tradition. In 2013, Mr. Allen enrolled at the California Institute of Technology, or Caltech, an elite research university in Pasadena, California. At that time, according to federal data, Caltech admitted less than 11% of its undergraduate applicants. There, Mr. Allen studied mechanical engineering. He graduated with a 3.0 GPA, according to his LinkedIn profile. In the summer of 2014, he did a summer internship at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, according to his LinkedIn profile. And a local news clip from 2017 shows Mr. Allen clad in a checkered collared shirt and sweater, demonstrating his design for a wheelchair emergency brake at a conference focused on designing products for older people. He was also involved in the Nerf Club, in which members armed with foam toys organized campus battles, and belonged to a campus Christian fellowship. Another fellowship member recalled that while Mr. Allen was generally quiet and studious, he was not shy about defending his own interpretation of his faith. Quoting, he was definitely a strong believer in evangelical Christianity at the time I knew him, end quote, the fellow member, Elizabeth Terlinden, said. After graduating from Caltech in 2017, Mr. Allen spent several years working as a mechanical engineer, a self-employed video game developer, and a college test prep tutor, according to his LinkedIn profile. In 2022, he enrolled at the California State University, Dominguez Hills, to pursue a master's degree in computer science. The university said in a statement on Saturday that it had a record of a student matching Mr. Allen's name earning a degree in 2025. Bin Tan, a professor of computer science at the university, taught Mr. Allen in several classes. I'm very shocked to see the news, Dr. Tan said in an email. He was a very good student indeed, always sitting in the front row of my class, paying attention, and frequently emailing me with coursework questions. End quote. Records shared by the 2 law enforcement officials show that Mr. Allen bought a handgun in October 2023 and a shotgun in August 2025. According to the note shared by authorities, Mr. Allen told his colleagues and students in recent days that a personal emergency would keep him from his tutoring duties, and told his parents that he had, quoting, an interview. Then he took a train from Los Angeles to Washington via Chicago, checking into the Hilton Hotel a day before a day or two before the hotel hosted the White House Correspondents Association dinner, Todd Blanche, the acting attorney general, told Meet the Press on Sunday. Mr. Blanche added that initial evidence indicated that Mr. Allen had acted alone. End. The next article, ICE warehouse plan faces delay over lack of environmental reviews. This ICE is Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, ICE, I-C-E. ICE warehouse plan faces delay over lack of environmental reviews. Officials have argued in court filings that the projects are exempt from federally required assessments but are scrambling after a judge disagreed. This is by Hamed Ali-Aziz, April 27th. The Trump administration is scrambling to conduct environmental impact reviews of warehouses it plans to convert into immigrant holding facilities after a flurry of lawsuits claiming the administration sidestepped federal requirements. The Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency, ICE, is buying the warehouses to help it increase the rate of deportations, which depends on having enough space to house detainees. The administration currently has about 58,000 immigrants in custody and fell short of its target to reach 100,000 beds by the end of last year. But the plan to buy and retrofit commercial warehouses to accommodate tens of thousands more detainees may be delayed after hitting roadblocks, including opposition from residents and officials in communities where the warehouses are located. Now states are trying to block the projects by arguing that the Trump administration failed to do environmental reviews required under federal law. In court filings, ICE officials have argued the warehouse renovations are exempt from reviews required under the National Environmental Policy Act, citing a variety of reasons. Justice Department officials have voiced concerns in recent weeks that the approach could leave the administration vulnerable to legal challenges, internal documents show. Those fears were realized this month when a federal judge in Maryland blocked plans to retrofit a warehouse in the state, citing the lack of an environmental review. Quoting, "That Maryland result changed their strategy," said Jamison E. Colburn, a professor at Pennsylvania State University who focuses on environmental law. The administration's move to conduct environmental reviews, he said, appeared to be them biting the bullet in view of a bigger loss if they didn't. End quote. Agency officials now have plans to conduct environmental assessments of at least 2 of the warehouse sites the government has purchased, according to documents obtained by the New York Times. The reviews could take months, according to experts. So far, the Department of Homeland Security, which houses ICE, has purchased 11 warehouses across the country for about $1 billion, billion with B. In the Maryland case, the federal government argued that the project was exempt from a review under the National Environmental Policy Act because it was, among other things, not close to any environmentally sensitive zones and was in an area that had already been built on. In filings in New Jersey and Michigan, the government indicated it would complete the environmental assessments after developing more specific retrofit plans. So far, legal challenges targeting environmental issues have been filed against warehouse projects in New Jersey, Michigan, Maryland, and Arizona. In a statement, Homeland Security officials said the agency had complied with federal laws and accused liberals of backing the effort to compel environmental reviews to slow down the Trump administration's deportation campaign. The warehouse plan is also intended to help scale back the government's reliance on private contractors and state entities. Owning more of the detention facilities owning more of the detention facilities would allow the government to have more control of the space. But a senior U.S. official who was not authorized to speak publicly on the matter told the Times that the new Homeland Security Secretary, Markwayne Mullin, had expressed skepticism about purchasing more warehouses. Todd Lyons, the acting head of the Immigration Agency, told the House Appropriations Committee this month that Mr. Mullin was still studying ICE's warehouse plans. Quoting, "He's looking at our whole detention plan. We're making decisions based on if we're going to move forward at these locations," he said. Mr. Lyons said the facilities would be constructed responsibly. Quoting again, "It's actually to be retrofitted to become a detention facility, one that we'll actually be proud of, one that would actually have standards," he said. The environmental law in question is the National Environmental Policy Act, which requires a review by the government of the potential environmental impact of significant federal actions. If the agencies find that there might be an adverse impact, they must then do a more rigorous review. This story is going very long, and I will stop at this point. If you would like to hear the rest of the story, you can call Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service at 716-821-5555. To hear the rest of the story, staff will read it to you. 716-821-5555. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The next article, Iran offers plan to focus on Strait of Hormuz and delay nuclear talks. Summary. In its latest offer delivered on Sunday, Iran proposed opening the key waterway, the Strait of Hormuz, to shipping traffic and lifting the U.S. blockade while postponing the thornier nuclear issue until later, by Farnaz Fasihi, April 27, 2026. Iran has offered the United States a new proposal for negotiations that focuses on opening the Strait of Hormuz and lifting the U.S. sea blockade on Iran as a way of ending the war, and then tackling nuclear negotiations later, according to 3 Iranian officials. Iran's foreign minister, Abbas Araghchi, delivered his latest plan to Pakistan on Sunday, after an initial proposal from Iran a day earlier had been rejected by President Trump, according to the Iranian officials familiar with the details of negotiations, who asked not to be named because they were discussing sensitive diplomacy. Mr. Trump is holding a meeting this afternoon to review Iran's latest proposal. Quoting, "They have achieved none of their goals, and this is why they are asking for negotiations. We are now considering it," Mr. Araghchi said to a Russian reporter on Monday, according to a video of the interview. Mr. Araghchi was in Russia on Monday and met with President Vladimir V. Putin and Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. The White House was mum on its response. Quoting, "These are sensitive diplomatic discussions and the U.S. will not negotiate through the press," said Olivia Wales, a White House spokeswoman. "As the President has said, the United States holds the cards and will only make a deal that puts the American people first, never allowing Iran to have a nuclear weapon." End quote. Iran's new proposal was delivered after weeks in which Tehran and Washington exchanged draft proposals but made no headway on the thorny issues surrounding Iran's nuclear program. The United States has demanded that Iran suspend its nuclear program for 20 years and hand over its 972-pound stockpile of highly enriched uranium, which could quickly be turned into several bombs if Iran chose to militarize its program. Iran has refused, calling the U.S. demands overreaching. In the proposal Iran delivered to Pakistan on Saturday, Iran had offered a 5-year suspension of its uranium enrichment, followed by 5 years of very low-grade civilian enrichment in labs. It would have diluted its stockpile and kept half of it at home under international inspectors, while giving the other half to Russia, an ally. But the United States rejected the offer. Mr. Trump, on Saturday, said Iranians had given him a response that was not good enough. Quote, so Iran came up with another idea: leave the harder issues for later. Quoting, this is a face-saving change in sequencing. Put Hormuz first as part of war-ending arrangements, not formal negotiations. Lift the blockade and defer the harder issues so they don't sink the process at the outset, end quote, said Ali Vaez, the Iran director for the International Crisis Group, a conflict prevention research organization. Since the war started, a cohort of senior generals of the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps have been running the war and making key decisions about strategy, ceasefire, and talks with the United States, according to Iranian officials. The new supreme leader, Ayatollah Mojtaba Khamenei, gravely injured and isolated in hiding, has deferred authority to the generals. On Monday, 261 Iranian lawmakers from various political factions signed a statement in support of the negotiating team, led by Parliament Speaker General Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, to signal unity. But 5 lawmakers from the ultra-hardline faction, opposed to any concessions with Washington, refused to sign. In the new proposal made on Sunday, Iran said that it plans to monetize the Strait of Hormuz once it is open to maritime traffic by charging a toll or service fees to passing tankers. Some Iranian officials have publicly floated the idea of a $2 million per vessel toll, saying the money would exceed Iran's oil revenues. But Oman, which also shares the southern part of the strait, and other Arab countries in the Persian Gulf, oppose this idea and have called for unconditional opening of the waterway. The idea to leave nuclear talks for a later date is an attempt to break the current stalemate, with a fragile ceasefire barely holding. The 3 Iranian officials said Iran does want to return to the negotiating table with the Americans, recognizing that the current status quo was not tenable, but does not want to do it while under the blockade of the U.S. Navy. Mr. Trump was to hold a meeting Monday afternoon to review Iran's latest proposal. Over the weekend, Mr. Trump abruptly canceled the trip of his negotiators to Pakistan, where they were supposed to meet indirectly through mediation by Pakistan with Iran's Foreign Minister, Mr. Araghchi. But after Iran said it had no plans to meet with the Americans, the foreign minister departed Pakistan, and Mr. Trump said Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and his son-in-law, Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, were not traveling to Islamabad for nothing. The American sea blockade on Iran is causing economic duress in the aftermath of bombings by the United States and Israel that left much of Iran's infrastructure and industries in ruins. Iranian officials said there was concern that storage warehouses for basic food items would become empty within a few weeks. The war has disrupted domestic production, and the blockade is preventing Iran from importing goods through its major shipping ports along the Persian Gulf. The government has also started contingency plans for alternative routes, trucking in goods from Pakistan and Turkey and shipping smaller loads from Russia via the Caspian Sea, the officials said. End of article. On the subject of over-tourism, here is an article from Japan. In the foothills of Mount Fuji, the fight is on against unruly tourists. Huge crowds of visitors during cherry blossom season have put a picturesque Japanese town on edge. Some residents are trying to take charge. By James C. Hernandez and Kyuko Notoya. Just after sunrise on a cloudless spring day, Junichi Horiuchi, wearing a Dodgers cap and hot pink gloves and carrying a walking stick, was on the hunt. Mr. Horiuchi, the leader of a civic group, was picking up trash and looking for unruly tourists at the Arakurayama Sengen Park in Fuji Yoshida, an idyllic town of about 46,000 in the foothills of Mount Fuji. He was joined in his quest by a local radio personality and a professor of medicine. The trio issued polite warnings to tourists who ventured off the designated path. For Mr. Horiuchi, 54 years old, the mission is personal. He broke almost 30 bones last year, he said, when he crashed his bicycle while trying to avoid a group of tourists taking an Abbey Road-style photo with Mount Fuji in the background. Quoting, "I want people to respect Japan's culture and rules," he said, surveying the early morning throng of tourists, some of whom had camped out all night for a perfect sunrise shot. "This is a matter of life and death." Fuji Yoshida, which lies southwest of Tokyo, is at the center of Japan's fight against badly behaved tourists. Foreign visitors, spurred in part by a weak yen that makes their money go further in Japan, have poured in. There were roughly 42 million tourists in 2025, double the number a decade ago. Now, anti-foreigner sentiment is rising in some parts of the country, and authorities have faced pressure to limit the number of tourists. With its fading textile industry, Fuji Yoshida once craved more tourists to help rejuvenate its economy, but not anymore. There have been widely publicized reports of visitors using backyards as bathrooms, entering homes without permission, blocking school traffic, and leaving behind heaps of trash. This year, the town took drastic action. It canceled its marquee Cherry Blossom Festival, which began a decade ago, declaring, "The peaceful lives of our citizens are being threatened." Officials also banned news outlets from capturing picturesque scenes that could contribute to over-tourism. Mayor Shigeru Horiuchi said the decision to cancel the festival was not about stopping people from seeing cherry blossoms. Indeed, officials did not block off any areas. Instead, he said, he was trying to discourage tourism in the busiest areas in response to complaints from residents about congestion. While the town has built more bathrooms and parking spaces, it has struggled to deal with the foot traffic. He also wants tourists to go to parts of Fuji Yoshida not familiar from Instagram. "The patience of residents is reaching its limit," he said in an interview at City Hall. Despite the cancellation of the festival, tens of thousands of people have continued to flock to the town, lining up for selfies at the Chureito Pagoda and snacking on local specialties like Yoshida udon noodles or strawberry-flavored soft-serve ice cream, colored red to evoke the sunrise over Mount Fuji. On a recent day, a group of friends from the United States ventured off the main path to snap selfies under the cherry blossoms. Quoting, I saw this gorgeous photo on social media and I was like, how can I get myself here as fast as possible? Said Julia Morrow, 26, a retail worker from Ohio. If you don't get that photo, it's like, what's the point of the trip? Some visitors said they had taken time to study Japanese customs before their arrival. No walking and eating at the same time. Carry your own trash bag. We're trying to be respectful, said Carlene Morgan, a teacher from New Zealand, who was on an 11-day tour of Japan with her partner to see cherry blossoms. It's what we would want if someone was coming to our country. For decades, Fuji Yoshida was well off the radar, even for many Japanese. That began to change in 2013 when UNESCO added Mount Fuji to its World Heritage List. With the local weaving industry in decline, the town tried to appeal to a more cosmopolitan crowd. Wine bars and traditional izakaya bars popped up where vacant shops once stood. Then, after the pandemic, hordes of tourists arrived, looking to replicate majestic views of Mount Fuji they had seen online, often set to music by Coldplay, Hans Zimmer, and others. This isn't a movie set, it's Fuji Yoshida, reads one on Instagram. Troubles with over-tourism are widespread in the area. In nearby Kawaguchiko, officials put up a billboard-sized screen in 2024 to deter tourists from photographing a convenience store that had become a social media phenomenon because it appeared as if the mountain were sprouting from its roof. I'll abbreviate this article at this point. If you would like to hear the rest of it, please call Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service at 716-821-5555, and staff will read the remainder of the article to you. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the April 28th, 2026 New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Here is an article about gaining Canadian citizenship. Have a Canadian great-great-grandparent? It could make you Canadian. Canada has opened a route to citizenship for people who can prove they have a Canada-born ancestor. Millions could qualify, and Americans are already lining up to apply. By Vjosa Isai and Martina Steves Gridneff, reporting from Toronto on April 27th. Ellen Arthur, a 79-year-old retired family lawyer in Lexington, Virginia, has decades of experience digging up personal records for her clients, but surfacing a century-old baptismal ledger kept by a Catholic church in Montreal, where her mother was born, was a first. That dusty old record is what Ms. Arthur is leaning on to seek Canadian citizenship for her 2 adult sons. They are among thousands of Americans using a new stipulation in Canada's citizenship rules that came into effect in December, under which people who can prove a direct Canada-born ancestor, a grandparent, great-grandparent, or someone even further back, can become Canadian. Ms. Arthur had already been eligible for citizenship as the daughter of a Canada-born Canadian, but had not pursued it. Under the old policy known as the first-generation rule, her sons would not have been able to inherit citizenship because neither she nor they were born in Canada. Now, the access to being Canadian can theoretically stretch generations back if one can prove they are a direct descendant of someone born in Canada. And while the process is bureaucratic, and Miss Arthur's case has been stalled by clerical and administrative hiccups, it's already attracting hopeful Canadians, most from the United States. The number of successful applications by U.S. nationals for Canadian citizenship by descent rose by nearly 50% in January compared with January 2025 to 2,470 from 1,715, according to data from the Canadian Immigration Ministry. It was the first month for which data was available since the new rules came into effect. The changes came as a result of a legal campaign by a small number of families living abroad who were unable to pass down Canadian citizenship because of the first-generation stipulation. Following a court ruling, Canada expanded citizenship to the descendants of Canadians born outside the country before December 15, 2025. For children born or adopted abroad after December 15, 2025 by a foreign-born Canadian parent, the parent needs to have lived in Canada for at least 3 years before the child's birth or adoption to be able to pass the citizenship to them. The change could extend Canadian citizenship to potentially millions of people around the world, many of whom have never lived in Canada and may have only a distant ancestral tie to it, said Rick Lamanna, a Toronto-based partner at Fragomen, a global immigration and relocation company. The new policy, he added, stood in contrast both to those of other advanced economies seeking to limit immigration and to Canada's own significant tightening of other immigration routes. In the past 2 years, Canada has slashed the numbers of foreign students, temporary workers, and number of permanent residents. That has already resulted in Canada's population shrinking. The policy expanding who can qualify for Canadian citizenship also stands in stark contrast to the evolving discourse about who should be American in the United States, where President Trump wants to see even birthright citizenship curtailed. Among developed economies, Canada now has one of the most inclusive rules on passing down citizenship generation to generation. If you would like to hear the remainder of this article, please call Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service 716-821-5555, and staff will be happy to read it to you. Here is an article about King Charles's visit to Washington, D.C. King Charles will speak of reconciliation and renewal during address to Congress. The state visit of King Charles III comes at a moment of tension over the war in Iran between President Trump and Prime Minister Keir Starmer, by Michael D. Shear, April 27, 2026. King Charles III of Britain will acknowledge on Tuesday that his country has had its differences with the United States, but he plans to tell a joint session of Congress that, quoting, "the two countries have always found ways to come together," according to a preview of his remarks by Buckingham Palace. The King's speech is a centerpiece of his first visit to the former colonies as Britain's monarch. It comes at a fraught time for the relationship between the two governments, with President Trump mocking Prime Minister Keir Starmer for refusing to join the war in Iran. But in his speech, the King plans to say that the story of the two countries over the past 250 years has been marked by reconciliation and renewal, and has produced what he will call one of the greatest alliances in human history. The King and Queen Camilla began planning for their American trip months before the tensions emerged between Mr. Trump and Mr. Starmer, and British officials and representatives of Buckingham Palace have repeatedly said the King does not get involved in day-to-day politics or foreign policy. But privately, officials have said they are hopeful that the core message in the King's speech might help to soothe tensions between the President and the Prime Minister. The palace said he will argue that Shared democratic values are woven deeply into the fabric of both countries. Palace officials said the king will briefly reference the shooting at the White House Correspondents' Dinner on Saturday, offering sympathy to Mr. Trump and those who attended. But he will focus on the things the United States and Britain have done together. In particular, palace officials said, he will speak about cooperation in the Middle East and Ukraine and will take note of the NATO Defense Pact and the submarine partnership with Australia and the United States. Mr. Trump has been particularly brutal in his assessment of the British Navy, calling the country's battleships toys. The palace said the king will speak with particular pride about the Royal Navy and its successes. Mr. Trump has said he is a fan of the royals, often citing the fact that when he was 6, he watched the coronation of Queen Elizabeth II, the king's mother. The royal couple's arrival at Joint Base Andrews kicked off 2 days of pomp and circumstance in Washington. The king, dressed in a blue suit, and the queen, wearing a pink coat dress, listened as the U.S. military band played the national anthems of Britain and the United States. The king and queen were greeted by the State Department's top official in charge of protocol. They walked through an honor cordon of U.S. military personnel before heading to the White House for their first formal stop. There, the royal couple met briefly with Mr. Trump and Melania Trump, the First Lady, and viewed a new White House beehive. The hive on the South Lawn is shaped like a miniature White House and is the home for 2 new bee colonies. Mrs. Trump last week unveiled the latest work of presidential apiculture, the science of maintaining honeybee colonies for pollination, honey production, and wax. The first official White House bee colonies were installed in 2009 by Michelle Obama, the First Lady at the time. The bees supported pollination of the White House vegetable garden that Mrs. Obama created as part of her push for healthy eating. Hives installed by Mrs. Obama support as many as 70,000 bees during peak summer months, according to the White House, and can produce up to 225 pounds of honey a year. The Trump administration said Mrs. Trump's new hive could increase production to over 255 pounds of honey annually. The visit to the White House beehive is a nod to the king's long-standing interest in environmental issues and conservation. There are 4 beehives in the gardens around Buckingham Palace, and 2 more outside Clarence House, the official residence of the royal couple. The official royal website notes that the Queen produces honey that is sold at the store Fortnum & Mason to raise money for charity. Monday's events concluded with a garden party for the King and Queen at the British Embassy. The guest list included White House officials like Stephen Miller, the Deputy Chief of Staff, and his wife, Katie Miller, the House Speaker, Mike Johnson, and Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. The President and the King will have a private meeting on Tuesday before the King addresses Congress in the afternoon. Mr. Trump will host a state banquet for the royal couple on Tuesday evening. The King and Queen will head to New York City on Wednesday morning, where they will lay a wreath at the September 11th memorial and participate in a gala that evening. The King will also visit a youth organization in Harlem, and the Queen will participate in an event at the New York Public Library. On Thursday, the royal couple will lay a wreath at the Arlington National Cemetery and travel to rural parts of Virginia. End of article. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the April 28, 2026 New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Here is an opinion article, a guest essay by Brent J. Goldstein, a professor at Vanderbilt University who specializes in cybersecurity and artificial intelligence. The article's title is "Your Passwords Are Probably Screwed." Anthropic recently sent a shockwave through the cybersecurity world when it said its new artificial intelligence model, Claude Mythos, had exhibited an extraordinary ability to find previously unknown vulnerabilities in software, a hacker's fantasy. Concern over the tool's power caused Anthropic to restrict its release mainly to bigger companies, allowing them time to secure their software. What is everyone else supposed to do? Smaller companies, organizations, nonprofits, and regular people are just as much at risk as larger companies, but they most likely lack the skills and resources to address these challenges before their systems are compromised. Many people may think these problems belong only to the world of cybersecurity experts or tech people, but that's no longer true. New AI tools are going to increase how much insecure software you use in your day-to-day life, while giving attackers a new powerful weapon to exploit vulnerabilities. If you're still being careless about things like the strength of the passwords you choose, you're in for a pretty bad time. If there was ever a time to finally take your cybersecurity practices seriously, it's now. I often give talks on cyber defense to small groups. Inevitably, the conversation turns to personal concerns. Is this app okay? What should I do to protect my phone? Typically, I find a vulnerability for each person. One hasn't installed bug fixes or security updates on their phone. Another doesn't use two-factor authentication on critical applications. Many have a dangerous app on their device. When confronted with the reality that they are at risk of attack, most insist that enjoyment and convenience outweigh the potential downsides. That's always been a dangerous miscalculation, but it's worse now. We need to correct our behavior immediately and return to fundamentals. Though I'm exasperated that I keep repeating myself, the best advice is still what I would tell people at the beginning of my career. Use strong passwords that are unique across every site, preferably through a trusted password manager. Better yet, when a site offers a passkey, take it. A passkey lets you sign in with your face or fingerprint. No typed password that could be stolen by phishing. For accounts without passkeys, use an authenticator app for two-factor authentication, not text messages. Always keep all your software up to date and uninstall unnecessary apps. I would also add, be wary of new and unproven software that's recommended to you in your social media feeds. Avoid businesses and technologies that don't make it abundantly clear that they prioritize your safety. Be cautious about giving permission to access location, camera, Bluetooth networks, microphone, and other features on your device to an app you've never heard of. Let me read that again. Be cautious about giving permission to access location, camera, Bluetooth networks, microphone, and other features on your device to an app you've never heard of. Never use a website if you get a security pop-up that warns you not to proceed. These actions are most likely the best things you can do personally to try to stay ahead of what is coming. We know the risks of sloppy practices. Almost everyone knows someone who has been a victim of an online scam. Many more of us have had our personal information or passwords leaked online because of never-ending data breaches. AI tools will be able to identify and exploit people, including you, at a scale unseen previously. It has been exciting to see my non-technical friends using AI coding tools like Codex, Claude Code, and Perplexity Computer to build and create things they have always wanted to build. Idea to execution is now measured in seconds, and there's a remarkable feeling of empowerment that comes with building something without a computer scientist or engineer. However, as people create more software, they're providing additional targets that new models like Mythos can attack. If you build it, they will come. The good news is that those coding agents can write secure code. I see them doing it every day. But it usually happens only because someone knew to ask. It's like hiring inexperienced contractors to build you a house. They might build what you describe, but if you don't think to ask for locks on the doors or a fence around the yard, you might not get them. Like maintaining a home, keeping up with digital security across your software and devices is a constant process that you have to be proactive about. I'm abbreviating this opinion piece at this point. If you would like to hear the rest, please call Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service at 716-821-5555, and staff will be happy to read it to you. Here's an interesting article about navigating the Strait of Hormuz. The small UK agency that's a 911 for ships in the Strait of Hormuz. At a military base outside Portsmouth, England, a 24-hour service monitors the Persian Gulf, the Red Sea, and part of the Indian Ocean, responding to distress calls. By Stephen Castle, April 28th, 2026. When a ship comes under fire in the Strait of Hormuz, one of the first places its distress call is likely to be heard is thousands of miles away on a military base outside Portsmouth on the south coast of Britain. Quoting, "The most distressing events are ones where you're being called up by a crew or master of a vessel that has just been attacked," end quote, said Commander Joanna Black, head of operations at the United Kingdom Maritime Trade Operations Centre. The organization, led by the British Navy, acts as a monitoring and emergency service for commercial shipping in one of the world's busiest maritime zones. It was founded around 25 years ago, originally in Dubai, as part of the British response to the 9/11 terror attacks. It later switched its focus to helping to combat piracy off the coast of Somalia. And since the start of the U.S.-Israeli war against Iran on February 28th, its services have become increasingly vital for sailors and shipping companies seeking to navigate the Red Sea, the Indian Ocean, and the Persian Gulf, in particular the Strait of Hormuz. The agency's evolution reflects the importance that Britain, an island nation highly dependent on international trade that once had the world's most powerful navy, has long placed on maritime security and freedom of navigation. With its naval knowledge, the unit has the skills and technology to understand the challenges facing global shipping, and it has established itself as a trusted, impartial source of critical information. At the top of a hill with a spectacular view over Portsmouth Harbor, the secure military base that hosts the center stands out from the approaching roadway, with a tall communication tower visible against the skyline. Inside is what looks like a fairly ordinary office space, except for the massive screens at either end of the room, displaying digital maps and the movement of ships. When vessels report problems to the agency by satellite phone or email, it notifies local Coast Guard, military, or other authorities best placed to assist. It also posts information about incidents and shipping traffic on its website and on social media, in the process becoming an invaluable source of information for shippers, policymakers, and the public. Sometimes a vessel has been attacked by a missile or a UAV, said Commander Black, using the technical term for a drone, or it can be that there's a small arms fire that's frequently directed at the bridge or the engine room. For those involved, it can be absolutely terrifying, she said. Before the Iran war began, typical traffic through the strait was around 130 ships a day, according to the organization. But the number has fallen precipitously amid the conflict, to between 8 and 10 a day now, the agency says. The effective closure of the strategically important waterway has had a chilling effect on the global economy, driving energy prices higher. Around 850 large vessels remain stranded in the region, waiting until it's safe to pass through the strait, with around 20,000 seafarers affected. Both the United States and Iran have sought to control the Strait of Hormuz. Iran says that only ships that have permission from the country's Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps will be allowed to pass, while the U.S. Navy says it is intercepting ships coming from or traveling to Iranian ports. U.S. officials said in early March that Iran had used small boats to lay mines in the strait, and earlier this month it said Iran could not locate all of its mines in the waterway. U.S. and European officials say the situation is complicated because no one knows how many mines have been laid. Speaking on Monday in the control room, Commander Black said that the agency had so far received no reports from vessels of sightings of mines, although she added that very few commercial ships were plying the waters that may have been mined. Concern about possible mines has been enough to make industry incredibly cautious, Commander Black said. Since the start of March, the organization has logged 41 incidents in the region, of which 26 were direct attacks on vessels, resulting in a fire, flood, or serious incident. The vast majority occurred at the beginning of the war. Now, with a shaky ceasefire in place, incidents are more likely to involve vessels being hailed by radio and sometimes boarded, with seafarers being occasionally detained, Commander Black said. Despite its links to the British Navy, the organization prides itself on its neutrality and says that providing accurate, factual information is the basis of its credibility and value to shipping firms. The 18-person team at the center near Portsmouth, which is staffed 24 hours a day, gathers information from vessels no matter whose flags they fly or what sort of relationships their home countries have with London. Cooperation with it is voluntary, but logging information with the organization can help shipping firms reduce their insurance costs. It works closely with a similar service operated by the French authorities in the Gulf of Guinea, west of Africa. If a second-hand source informs them of an incident, operators in the control room near Portsmouth will first try to contact the crew of the affected vessel. If that proves impossible, they will attempt to talk with nearby ships to try to verify the situation. Quoting, "We have had instances where crews have ended up in the water, and by informing local Coast Guard, they've been rescued. Or we can give them information about where people in the water were last seen," said Commander Black. "It can get very busy in here, very tense, but you'll find that when everything is happening, it's quite quiet and focused." End of article. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the April 28th issue of the New York Times. Your reader has been Pat Connolly. Thank you for listening.